So this is an educational panel. Now, I came across a reading list for 7th and 8th graders in the year 1908. Now, if you look at the list of books these kids were reading, it's a reading list that would probably only show up in first-year university today. It includes Nathaniel Hawthorne, Charles Dickens, Shakespeare, etc. And not the easy stuff, the hard stuff. No picture books, just written. If you look at a group of 2023 recommended middle school books today, they're all comic graphic novels, all of them. The average age for literacy in the pioneering age in North America before the invention of the school system was 5 years old. You know, these kids were milking cows, building fences, smoking cigarettes, and reading at 5 years of age. So I'm going to kickstart that. Now, you guys, any of you guys can jump on. Because we're running low on time, though, please don't launch into a 10-minute dialogue when you answer. Make it succinct, please. Madison and Macy, you guys went through the school system. How come you're not blue-haired and BMI of 32 and hating men? How did you do it, and how can you help the next generation follow your path?
Did I not clarify that in my speech? I just got No, it definitely was family. And reading, I love that you bring that up, because it took me months to get through Master and his Emissary. Months upon months, but I was determined to get through it. And that's why we really believe in reading, and I want to increase that recommended reading list, because Jordan Peterson had one. That's where we started. And then we started listening to Matthew Ehret, who talks about history. And all we do is read. And it's not knowledge for the sake of knowledge, because it's like progress for the sake of progress. It's like there's purpose in why I read. I want to figure out the world I'm around. And the quote that we brought up a couple times, learn what you are to negotiate who you are. Who you are is, everybody keeps saying when I was writing the speech, it's like who you are, you can choose who you want to be. I can be a girl, I can be a boy. And it takes it away from the fact that creating who you are, it is a negotiation. You have to choose to be a good person every day. That is something that can change, and even Cam and I were talking, and that we can all be corrupted. That's the point of the left hemisphere. You know, it likes control, likes the power, and you have to consciously make that decision. And even the books the kids are reading. You can pick up the Bible and you can use it to hit people over the head, or you can use it as a gift. That's why mode of attention is kind of important.
That, and just to add on to that, our as we mentioned in our speech, our parents told us when we were being idiots, and it was like one of those things where now I'm accustomed to the fact that I can be a moron, like, and I think that that's something that a lot of people need to just be able to do, is when be open enough to receive that information that you could be wrong, because I think it shows that you care about yourself enough to update yourself. Otherwise, you just get stuck in this echo chamber and you're surrounded by this perpetual loop of what you think you know, as opposed to just look at all of the minds in this room. It is not just me who has all the answers. It's all of you who have all these amazing answers. And so that's that openness to like, no, like I want to hear everything that you have to say and everything you have to offer. And yeah.
Anyone want to jump in, or should we move along? I've got questions for each of you, so I can just go to the next question, unless you guys have something you want to add. Michelle, as an occupational therapist, you're in a position to educate the general public about health matters. Not all education occurs in schools. Sometimes it's between the healthcare provider and their patients, who may have questions about certain new medical procedures. How should a healthcare practitioner navigate?
So first of all, I need to say that I was trained as an occupational therapist, but thanks to our existing condition, I am no longer able to use that title. So I still have the knowledge. I think the best thing is to go back to the simplest places. First of all, we want to look at how bodies develop naturally. We want to, I actually spent time with some physicians that instead of a prescription pad, they had a list. So sleep, food, exercise that they would go through with their especially their kids who they were seeing. And we want to look at the basics. How is this child being nourished? Are they dealing with love and support and connection? Are they getting outside in nature and getting exercise? How much screen time do they have? And when we look at those basic functions, then bodies can move forward in a natural way. Again, I talked in my 10 minutes about how particular times of development, there are hormones that are shifting and changing, and this is natural. This is what is meant to occur to help these bodies develop in the way that they're supposed to develop. And we've been tied into big pharma. We've been tied into there must be a prescription. And when we take a look at lifestyle, and that's what occupational therapy does, it looks at the practice of doing life. And when we look at lifestyle, that's where the changes can be made for most of us in terms of health and in terms of chronic disease. So any advice for a health practitioner would be to talk about the real life stuff. You know, are you getting enough exercise? Are you outside in nature? How are things with your family? Is everybody loving each other? You know, are you watching TV? Well, maybe you should turn it off, right? Those kinds of basic functions, I think, are the most important places for our wellness teams to focus.
No piggybackers?
I might have a piggyback. That reminded me of something that it just popped in my head just now, which is that it takes work. Anything worth doing takes work. And so it's like doing your own research into how it is that you want to plan out maybe a diet plan for you or your kids. If, like, let's say you don't want to eat trash, like that takes work. You have to do the research, and then not only that, you have to figure out how you're going to budget things and what's going to work out. Ask your family members, are they on board with it? And then the other idea is like a workout routine. Me and my family do workout routines together, which is really fun. And I love what Cam said, which is having each other around the dinner table to have discussions, because conversations are really important. But it's right, though, that you do need proper nutrition. You do need to educate yourself on even electromagnetic frequency pollution in that regard, too, and chemtrails. It's like, put in the work, I guess, to even with what I feel bad, I forgot your name. What's your name again? Drea. What she mentioned about homeschooling, you might not think that you can do it, but you can. It just takes a lot of hard work and outreaching to people, and so that was my 2 bits on that.
All right. Vlad?
Just a quick point, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, or maybe not, but people usually tend to confuse 2 very simple words, and they are simple and easy, right? And they are very, very different. And my favorite motivational speaker, Jim Rohn, has a saying that it's hard to build good habits, but it's easy to build life with them. And it's easy to have bad habits, but boy, oh boy, your life will be difficult with them.
I'd like to add in one more thing on that too, is with those habits, when as parents we build them at a young age, our job in the long run is so much easier.
Yeah, and my wife, for example, has homeschooled our children. One of them is now working, but she also educates, she runs a micro school. She educates other families' kids. So if you're looking for an alternative solution, you can always find someone who's, such as my wife, who's, you know, a Ivy League, she went to Ivy League school on scholarship. She's smarter than I am, and she's already gotten our son, one of our sons, all the way through schooling. So those are resources you guys can look into as well. Drea, outside of school, perhaps there is no greater influence on the youth than the internet. How do you balance your journalistic duties, which, unlike our mainstream legacy media, requires objectivity, with your urge to communicate what you see as true in regards to our modern government activity?
Right. Wow, that's a good question. Well, for one, what I love about Rebel News is we tell you what our commitment is to you, and that is to bring you the other side of the story that the state-backed media doesn't cover. So in that sense, we're more free and front up, or up front, whereas you have the state media pretending that they're not operating for the state. We are communicating a promise to the people and fulfilling that. And so my questions are very neutral, and I try to think, you know, what would people want me to ask and what would people want me to follow up, and that's how I stay neutral. But you will notice at the beginning and sometimes the end, I do give my own opinions in there, especially if it's something that I am passionate about, and that's the beauty of also independent journalism. With Rebel News, it's not like there's some sort of handler saying like you can't have your own opinion. And I remember in my interview actually with Rebel News, I said, because I wasn't big on politics or anything until 2020, and I said to Ezra, I said, you know, I probably can't spell government, it was a joke. But I said, but I don't want to be told like how to do a story or anything like that. And he said, well, that's why you'll fit in here, because although we all stand for freedom and you know, liberties, we are all different. And so I love that I'm able to be passionate about a beat like the children and what's happening in the schools and stuff like that, and just work really hard at communicating the other side of the story in that area to you. So I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to say something off the cuff before I ask the next question? All right. You guys are doing very well. Cam, you're a businessman. You represent the entrepreneurs who see things for what they are, but are not in an official educational, media, or healthcare role. What does educating people that you meet in your business look like and mean to you?
Well, I think we're all in the educational role. I think we can use every opportunity. I mean, if you're shopping with your kids in a grocery store, you can educate them. I think every opportunity should be used. But where I find Canadians are pretty devoid is financial literacy. And the reality is that unless you have your finances in order, you're always going to be enslaved to someone. Okay? So one of the common complaints I hear a lot about doing homeschooling is, well, how can we give up our income? Like, how can I do it on one income? It's too hard. And it's a twofold answer, because anything that is worth doing comes at a great cost. And one of the realities is living in Victoria, yes, it's a beautiful city, but it comes at an extremely high price. So I look at it from a financial perspective. I pulled some numbers from some other locations. For example, you know, you could move to Alberta and you could buy a house in Lloydminster for about $248,000. Okay? So $248,000 as an example, and this is part of just kind of educating yourself. You only need an income of $60,000 a year to qualify for a mortgage. That's it. And you're with 12.5 grand down, your payments would be $1,300 a month. Which means that you could one of you could probably give up working and you could homeschool. So it's possible, but then you'll say, well, shit, I don't want to live in Lloydminster. I get that. I totally get it. But is your children's salvation and their soul worth you living there? These are hard things. There's no easy answer here. You can't have your cake and eat it too. This is going to require sacrifice. And again, I'll point back to my cultural heritage. As Indians, we sacrifice anything for our kids. That work ethic, we'll work 3 jobs. You look at it, that's just what you do. And it doesn't matter, like, okay, yeah, they're going to miss the scenery, they're going to miss whatever else, but they're going to gain you. That's worth more than anything here that could be offered. And as an example, if you look at it, like if you were to live in Victoria, a single family house here is like, what, $6 million these days? Oh, no, it's probably not that much. So a single family house is an example, or even if you bought a townhouse, for $700,000, you need a household income of $161,000 to qualify. Okay? So both of you have to work. Who's got time to homeschool? But homeschooling is possible if you make some additional choices. I looked at all 3 of the Western provinces. Like if you go to Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, there's affordable places in every one of those places. Now, they're not going to be maybe your favorite places, but they're doable. And once you gain financial freedom, you're going to teach your kids that value. I know we don't teach it in high school. I hear that complaint all the time. Why don't they teach financial freedom or financial literacy in high school? Why do you think they don't teach it? Because they don't want you to be financially free. That's not the end goal. The end goal is to have you enslaved to the government. So why would we teach you how to be liberated? But it's not their responsibility to teach it. It's yours. Who says they owe it to you to teach it to you? It's not, there's no right. There's no human rights thing that says they have to teach you that. All the world's education is so available these days. Look at it. We've never had such a proliferation of access to information. You can teach yourself anything, but we have to be willing to sacrifice either time, talent, or treasure to do that. And if your kids are worth it, you got to make that choice.
I'll just add one more thing about how we all can do it if we put in the work, and of course, if this applies to you, be a homeschool parent. And another thing is that it's less time to actually homeschool your kid because there's no distraction of 20 other kids. You're actually just teaching them the lessons. And also that lessons become integrated in the whole day. If you have a theme of the day, you can, as you're walking the dog, you can talk about the sky or whatever you're learning that thing. So there is just, it's really fun. And what I love about it, because my job is so demanding, I love that I get that quality time, and I find myself going, wow, I really missed out on some really special moments with my older child by watching them grasp onto a concept and learn and want to know more. It's actually fascinating, and I love every second of it. So, yeah.
I'm going to jump in. This actually reminds me of what Vlad talked about yesterday, being self-efficient and homeschooling. The point, if you think about it, I mean, we do 8-hour workdays, we do more 8-hour workdays, and it's like a daycare. You put your kids in school, and then you don't see them for the rest of the day. You don't have to invest. It's another drive that me and Macy have with some of the LGBTQ movements and stuff, is that parents are abdicating their responsibility to raise their kids. They put them in school, they get indoctrinated, deal done. And with homeschooling, you're picking that up, you're becoming more efficient, as Vlad alluded to yesterday, and taking that away from them.
Can I just add one more quick thing, real quick? So if you think about it, kids go to school 9 to 3, let's say, that's 6 hours. Between recess, lunch, maybe you're getting 5 hours of time. And they may be doing 4 or 5 classes. A class is about an hour with 30 kids. Your kid's getting 2 minutes. Seriously? You can't carve out an hour or two? In an hour or two, you could accomplish more than the school ever will. So it's not like any, and who cares if it took 4? If your kid at the end of turning 21 is a productive citizen in society, and they turn around and say, thanks for spending the time and investing in it. Because if you make that relationship with them now, they're not going to be people you're not going to be recognizing. You'll recognize them later, and they're not going to be estranged from you because you're going to lay the foundation. And the youngest years are the most important. We used to have half-day kindergarten. Now we have full day. Seriously? What are kindergartners learning? Nuclear physics? They don't need to be there all day. Huh?
How to shake their hips like a drag queen.
Yeah, exactly. The other piece on that is, what do we want our kids to learn? You know, are the schools actually teaching our kids skills that are going to serve them in terms of being critical thinkers, in terms of moving forward in a society that is productive and that is cooperative and it is cohesive in ways that follow the natural order? So that's a big question too.
Just to build on what people have been sharing, I often say that it's your actions. You can talk all you want, but it's your actions really show what you value the most in your life. Where you spend most of your time is what you value the most of your life. And I'm not passing judgment, but I would ask you to reflect back on you. How much time are you spending with your kids? And is that the most important thing in your life? I'm blessed to be a father. I have a son who just turned 7 years old. Finally, I have access back to him. If you don't know, I was a second parent in this country that lost all parental rights because I stood up against the government in July of 2020. I didn't see my son. I was not allowed to be with him. I was the most dangerous person in this country. It breaks my heart every day. He was just turned 4 years old, and long story short, I had a very challenging co-parenting relationship leading to 2020, and I did my best to lay a foundation that whatever happens, he would have something within him to hold him over until I have him back, and now I'm in a new relationship. I have 2 young daughters, and I'm just blessed to be present, to live life with them, experiencing life with them, and I just don't know what else is more important in life than just to be with your kids and help them experience life to the fullest and provide all the experiences and making sure that they don't get subjected to the abuse. It broke my heart in 2020 to see kids being abused, and most people did nothing. Nothing. Nobody stood up, and it's difficult, but you have to keep going, because until other people stand up, you have to do it yourself, right? So, sorry guys.
Apology declined.
But that's the only regret that I have in the last 3 years, is the 2.5 years that I missed out on my child. Because I'm a loving father, and I wanted him to be the most successful he can be, because that's what I believe as a parent. And I made this quote a while ago, that my purpose in life is to be the best example to fulfill my personal potential for my children. So then they can do themselves that in their life, whatever their potential is. And as just been discussed, do you think the indoctrination institutions have that in mind for your children? Of course not. They want to raise little obedient slaves. And we all seen in the last 3 years how that unfolded. So, and this is the saying that's been going on for a while, the indoctrination, the institutionalized learning is the experiment. Homeschooling has been around for the longest time. Same way as the alternative medicine, quote unquote traditional medicine, that's the real thing. The medical establishment and the indoctrination system of our children is the experiment. And we're all witnessing how evil it is and how dark it is. And at this point, as much as we want to change the school system, as it's just been discussed by Cam and a few other people, I don't want to say it's impossible, but think about the energy that we're wasting instead of just focusing on the most important thing in our lives, and that's our children.
Yes, thank you, Vlad. And just so you guys know, those of you who were not here yesterday, Vlad is the founder of Hugs Over Masks, and he's got a table outside, right outside the front door, so please stop and support him if you can, by the way. And you're right, schooling did not really begin until the 1850s, right? So what were we learning? How did we have the scientific revolution, the Renaissance in both art and music? How did anybody go through the combustible engine, the founding of microbiology? How did we do that without schools? Well, I said earlier on, the average age of literacy before schools was 5 years old. And they weren't reading comic books in the 1700s. You know, my children have had time growing up in a homeschool environment they've been working part-time jobs since they were 13 years old. They've engaged in multiple self-learning, and my daughter literally is at 14 can make ventriloquist puppets that look just like the ones on Jim Henson's Muppet Show, because my younger daughter, who's 12, wanted to take up ventriloquism. So the possibilities, the stifling nature of a government-run healthcare, it's like going to the DMV or going through Air Canada at Calgary Airport or any other government-run system. It gets worse and worse and more expensive over time. Education is no different. Final question to Vlad. You have children and are in a health coaching industry. You're looked up to by clientele as a source of truth in health matters. What does educating the public look like to you, and what role does alternative education play in your children's lives? So,
going back to the 2020, when I went to my very first protest in my life, never been to any, May 2nd of 2020 to Queen's Park in Toronto, where I lived for 20 years. The two signs that are, well, we went to Dollarama with my girlfriend Sarah at the time. We didn't have any kids together yet. And we went to Dollarama, we got the whiteboards and we got the permanent markers and we just made the signs on our own. The two signs that my favorite ones, and I have a picture with them in Queen's Park from that time, one said real data versus fake model. Not a scientist, not an expert, but it was obvious to me in 2020 May that real data versus fake model, because that's what it was all based on. But the other one sign said, our kids deserve normal life, right? And from that standpoint is, there's enough information out there now. As much as they want to censor it, they can't censor it because there's truth is out there. And everything's available to you. And it's not complicated unless you want to make it complicated. But it's doing what you know is right for yourself first. And as a health coach, thank you for bringing that up, I always coach my clients the way as, I'm only going to ask you to do something that I do myself right now or I've done it in the past. I'm not going to ask you to do something that I haven't even tried it because it's incongruent with my nature. So I believe we should teach our kids the same way, and the best example to teach your kids is by your behavior. Because again, you can talk all you want, but kids observe you, and that's what they're going to do, unless you take them away from you and they're indoctrinated by other people. And the other thing I want to reflect quickly while I have an opportunity, and again, if you don't know, being raised in Soviet Union, I was indoctrinated in the communism religion because that's what it was, to the point where at 3 years old, I always say this story, and if you heard it, you can listen again. At 3 years old, I was in Moscow with my parents, and I had a meltdown because my parents told me that I cannot go and see Grandpa Lenin. Who knows who's Grandpa Lenin? It's a dead mummy on a red square in Moscow, the grandfather of the Russian Revolution. So at 3 years old, I just want you to really understand the level of the indoctrination. That at 3 years old, myself, this is not a hypothetical, myself, had a meltdown because my parents said it's winter in Moscow, very similar to Ottawa in February, okay, who was there, right? And they said, like, the line is 4 hours long. We cannot stay in the line. It's too cold for you to go see Grandpa Lenin. And I was heartbroken. As a 3 years old. The good thing for me, and that's why I say what I said yesterday, is that I still would rather my kids grow up in Soviet Union when I grew up in Canada right now, because that's how bad I see it now, because the indoctrination to communism is very different than indoctrination to the COVIDism. Because the communism only messed up my attitude towards life, but luckily, as you can see, I was able to turn it around. You can't really turn around COVIDism when you're subjected to constant fear and being afraid of other humans, and to the point where you're ready to mutilate yourself and you harm yourself and you're getting praised for that. That's evil to the next level, that whatever it takes, I will not allow for my children, and I'm not going to allow it for your kids. And I want to leave that too. I often say that if you're blessed to have children, take it as a great privilege and honor. And if not, you can still stand up for other kids. Because if they were blessed to have you as an awake parents, that's amazing. What about other kids? What about other kids that are not having awakened parents and they're getting abused all the time? They not deserve to be protected? So I choose to stand up for all kids, mine and yours. And if we all can do the same, we can see a change.
So the other thing I'll just leave you all with is the fact that two things you want to teach your kids, okay? One is, don't make an idol out of being liked. Canadian culture, everybody has to be liked. Your kids have to realize that people are not going to like them. That's okay. That's not the main thing. And that it's okay to be intolerant of some ideas. Not all ideas have to be tolerated. We live in a world where if you disagree, somehow it makes you bad. I'm not going to tolerate somebody being a pedophile. I'm intolerant of that idea. I don't find any common ground. So it's the same as I would be intolerant of somebody trying to trans the kids. We don't have common ground. We can't find common ground on that. It's okay to disagree with people, but not with emotion, but with an intellectual argument. Teach your kids how to argue critically and rationally. So they're not reacting out of emotion like the people you see on TV. The reason the leftists never debate is because they will lose every debate. There's no foundation they stand on. Then the idea of marketplace, their ideas are wholly bankrupt. That's why they always go to name calling. And so our challenge is when they call them, when I came to this country, they used to say, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It seems like we're the polar opposite now. And we have to teach our kids to have a thick skin, because that's what they're going to encounter, and that's okay. People don't all have to like you. I'm living proof of that. I got like one friend, so it's perfect.
I wanted to add one quick thing.
Who's your other friend, Cam, beside me?
I can be your friend.
I think we all are your friends now, no, Cam?
I wanted to add on something that I think everyone touched on already, so I don't want to do any repeats. But it was also a thing with post-secondary that I wanted to touch on quickly, because me and Maddie get asked the question a lot of times on if we're going to do post-secondary, if we're already in it. And I would say that there's already a lot of indoctrination, very much so, in post-secondary. And my answer to that is a lot of the answers that we've already kind of touched on, which is the idea of self-education. Because it's one of those things where we're all right in terms of we have more access to knowledge than we've ever had before, right at our disposal, and so we should utilize that. And that's why even in the speech, it was the idea of more generalists, to get more knowledge in your head on so many different topics, so that way we can combat the problems we're trying to combat now. And I like what Vlad said in terms of improve yourself to improve your kids, because if you do homeschooling, then you as a parent are also challenging yourself to get educated on topics you didn't know before, so that way you can teach your kids them. And then it's a relationship of, so what did you learn today? Oh, here's what I learned today. And now it's a bit of like a, oh, hey, like we're both learning something at the same time, because that's one of the things on how you keep that curiosity as a child alive in people, is the idea that we're all students, it doesn't matter how old we are, kind of thing. And that's something I wanted to touch base on, because and just to name some names in terms of some people who are already trying to, the idea around their own kind of online university type of things is, I know that Brett and Heather Weinstein from the Dark Horse podcast, if you just keep an eye on them, they've been talking about their own university for a while. And then I know that on Brighteon with Mike Adams, he's doing Brighteon University as well. It's an online thing. And then I also know that there is, and you might not know of him, but there's Matthew Arrett and Cynthia Chung. They are on CanadianPatriot.org, O-R-G, and they're with Rising Tide Foundation, and they're trying to educate people on the untold history of Canada, because history is so important. That's how we got to here in the first place, and we need to know exactly what it is, like what did we do, what have we done in the past, relating to the argument of the hemispheres, on just how we got here, so that way we don't do it again, so that way we can better update it. And as Cam just mentioned, it's not going to be an easy process, because we're not following the norm. We're going to look like crazies or anything like that, and it's not the usual. And that's the whole point, is step out your comfort zone, because like you can get mad at the government all you want, but if you keep relying on it, then like what are you doing? It's like try and take it for yourself. So yeah.
The other point I wanted to add is in 2020 at Queen's Park, when we started Hugs of the Masks, from the beginning I knew the whole attempt from the government would be to label us as extremists and endangered, etc. That's why with Hugs of a Mask we focus on having Festival of Life rather than the protest and bringing kids and festival, etc. And what we also did is we actually gave microphone to the children, and we'll let children speak. And you'll be amazed, you probably know, but you know what I'm saying, is that how much truth and just amazing intelligence children already have anyway, especially if you're your children. I'm sure things are rubbing off on them. But what I want to say with that too, I was saying often, because kids were there with parents, is of course you want to protect your kids, and I just said we have to, but you also have to equip them for the real world that we're all facing. So you have to tell them what's going on age appropriately, so then they will be prepared on their own what they're up against. And as an example, when I was 11 years old in Kazakhstan, my parents separated, and I became, quote unquote, I was older son, so I became a quote unquote man of the house, right? So my mom showed me there's a shotgun in the cupboard, and that's a bullet on top shelf. So if someone comes in the home in the middle of the night, you know where things are, right? But that's what you need to do to prepare for the real life, because I used to say this forever, that in Canada, people have been extremely spoiled. The two things that Canadians took for granted forever is safety and stability. Because anywhere else in the world, if you go to sleep, first of all, you don't know if you're going to wake up, because you don't know who's going to come to your house in the middle of the night. That's just the reality of life. That's why you have two doors, and they're metal, and they have 2 free locks on each. And no, you don't leave your door open. So I'm blessed to leave my door open in Canada, but I'm just saying that life is different in other places. And then the other thing is stability. When you wake up in the morning, you don't know what you're going to wake up to. As I mentioned yesterday, by the time I was 13 years old, I experienced collapse of Soviet Union and 2 defaults of currency. So you don't know when you wake up tomorrow what kind of life you're going to wake up to. Are you still going to have your job? Are you still going to have your money, etc.? And all of the diversing from the education of the kids, but that is education of the kids. You have to prepare them for the real life. You have to prepare them that life is unfair. And that's okay. That's called life, and it has challenges. And it's your choice to be either a victim or choose to be victorious in any circumstances and take responsibility and power back on you and figure things out and move forward any way you can.
I just wanted to very quickly add to your list of alternative sort of schools to check out. One is in the Lower Mainland. It's called Compass Christian Learning Center. I have done a report on it. There have been some teachers who have actually left Christian schools because the SOGI 1, 2, 3 curriculum is infecting those schools as well. And so if you really can't homeschool and you're in the area, it is an affordable sort of private school setup that you can check out. So that's Compass Christian Learning Center.
Thank you. And you guys will be interested to know that BC has the fastest growing homeschool population since the lockdown. It's almost doubled from 3.2% to almost 6%.
Our children are our future. And we need to, like everybody said here, put in the time, put in the attention, give them the love, show them that they are safe, but teach them how to think critically. When we do that, our world's going to work out.
All right. Oh, and one more plug for homeschooling. A couple of years ago, I realized my boys had never been in a fight, as you know, homeschoolers. So I started a neighborhood kids fight club. And I wrestled at the University of Alberta, and I've been doing jiu-jitsu and MMA for 11 years. So I wanted my boys to know how to take a punch and to give a punch. And I took the nerdiest batch of neighborhood homeschoolers, put them in a pile, and twice a week for 2 years, they beat the snot out of each other. And I kid you not, I have before and after videos of, you know, these piano-playing nerds who can barely hold up their hands with boxing gloves to guys who can bob and weave and stick and move and take double leg takedowns. Yeah, it was the neighborhood. We actually had t-shirts and belt systems. It was called the Fairfield Strength and Conditioning Combat Club. And anyways, we're going to wrap it up with that. So please give me a hand of applause for today's panelists.